Okay, in the previous class, we actually have discussed a bit regarding the capital allowance. Okay, so whereby we have discussed about the QPE, how we calculate QPE. Okay, so for today, we are going to continue with initial allowance and the rest of the topic, inshallah. Okay, so initial allowance, as I mentioned earlier in the previous class, okay, so this initial allowance can be claimed by the company when the company first purchased the asset. Okay, so that's why here it's mentioned initial allowance is a one-off allowance given when a person first acquired qualifying plant for business use. So it means that whenever the company purchased the asset and then the asset is basically used for the business to produce the income, then the company can claim for the initial allowance for that asset. Okay, so for this initial allowance, the rate is 20%. Okay, so the rate is similar for all types of asset. It is 20%. Okay, so the computation of capital allowance is at the end of basis period. Qualifying plant acquired at any time during the basis period will be given a full year capital allowance. No time apportionment is required. Okay, so when we discuss about the capital allowance, it's not like depreciation, okay, because depreciation you need to apportion based on when the company acquired for the asset. Okay, so for the initial allowance as well as the annual allowance, the company can claim the allowance for the whole year. Okay, so it means that even though the company acquire the asset in the midst of the financial year, the company can still claim 20% from the total QPE. Okay, so no apportionment needed. Okay, so unless otherwise stated, initial allowance is given at the rate of 20%. Okay, so usually it is 20%. Okay, 6.1 discuss about the eligibility of initial allowance. Okay, so the company need to fulfill these conditions in order to claim for the initial allowance. Okay, so A, the person has incurred capital expenditure on the provision of plant and machinery in the basis period for OYA. So it means that the company paid or incurred some cost to acquire for that asset. Okay. Second one, the asset must be in use for the purposes of business. Okay, so if let's say the company acquire the asset not for the purpose of business, let's say for personal use, like they purchase a car for their personal use, then the company cannot claim for the initial allowance for that car, okay, for the asset lah, okay. And then the person is the owner of the asset at the end of the basis period for a YA. So means that the company should be the owner for that asset. Okay, if an asset is acquired and disposed in the same year, initial allowance is given provided he is the owner and such asset is in use sometime before the disposal. Okay, so for this one, if let's say you acquire, let's say your financial year end is starting from 1st January up to 31st December. Then in June, you acquire the asset, okay. So you also use that for your business. Okay, and then on 31st, let's say in December, you want to dispose the asset. Okay, it's still within the same year. Okay, you can still claim 20% initial allowance from the total QPE, okay, which is the cost that you incurred to purchase for the asset, and then you can claim as the capital allowance for that year. Okay, so let's say you purchase in 2021, means that you can claim initial allowance for that asset in 2021, even though you actually dispose the asset during the same year. Okay, so we have example here. So hopefully you can try to look at this example on your own. Okay, I will try to explain another example afterwards. Okay, so we have this one. Okay, I think maybe this one you can skip because we are not focusing on mining, timber and construction business. Okay, but if you wanted to you want to have more knowledge regarding this scope of mining, timber and construction business, you can do so. Okay, so the same goes to this one. Okay, so let's continue with this one. Asset bought and sold in the same year. Okay, so this one is just like the previous one when we discussed about when the company purchased the asset and then they sold in the same year. So the company can claim for that initial allowance for that asset if the company used that for the business. Okay. Okay, so meaning of owner, meaning of in use, hopefully you can read on your own. Okay. Okay, so this one you can also read on your own. Okay, so the next one, annual allowance. Annual allowance, okay, so as the name implies, is an allowance given every year to the taxpayer so long as the asset is in use at the end of the basis period. Okay, so the rate varies according to industries and type of asset. It is computed on a straight line basis by reference to the full amount of qualifying planned expenditure. Okay, so for this one, annual allowance, okay, means that the company can claim for that annual allowance every year up to the amount of the QPE. Okay, so this one is straight line basis. Okay, means that you must look at the rate for that asset. For example, if you acquire heavy machinery, so the annual allowance is 20%. If let's say you acquire office equipment, if I'm not mistaken, it is 10% annual allowance. Okay, and then if you purchase motor vehicle, it is 20%. Okay, so in exam, you can refer to the book and the rate is also given in the question. Okay, so you don't have to worry. Means that you don't have to memorize the rate. Okay, so for this one, if you look at here, the eligibility, annual allowance are given if all the following conditions are fulfilled. Okay, it's just like initial allowance. Okay, so A, qualifying plan expenditure has been incurred. Okay, the asset is owned by the taxpayer at the end of basis period, and the asset is in use in the basis period for the purpose of business. Okay, so it basically similar with the conditions for initial allowance. Okay, so please read this example on your own. Okay, so this is the rate. Okay, so annual allowance rate for YA 2000, current year basis and subsequent years. Okay, so for the office equipment, furniture and fittings, the rate is 10%. So it means that if the company acquire office equipment or furniture and fittings, okay, so then the company can claim initial allowance when the company first acquired, initial allowance 20%, and then in the same year the company can claim 10%. Okay, and in the following year the company can claim annual allowance 10%. For the plant and machinery, which is general, okay, so the annual allowance is 14%. So for heavy machinery, motor vehicles, it is 20%. Okay, so if you look at here, it is basically the definition. What are motor vehicles? What is heavy machinery? Okay, what is plant and machinery and also others? Okay, so for motor vehicles, it generally includes all forms of transport which use motors to operate. Okay, I believe that you know what is motor vehicles. Okay, heavy machinery, it is determined generally by the nature of its usage. Heavy machinery functions mainly in the carrying out of construction activities. Okay, for example, bulldozer, crane, ditcher, and so on. Okay, so that's heavy machinery. So plant and machinery, it includes general plant and machinery not falling under the category heavy machinery motor vehicles. So it means that if the item or if the asset does not fall under motor vehicle and also heavy machinery, then it is considered as plant and machinery. So the examples are aircons, compressors, elevators, medical and laboratory equipment, ovens, etc. So that is basically plant and machinery. Okay, so others, it refers to office equipment and furniture and fittings. Okay, so we have example here. Okay, so let's discuss this example. Example 18.5. Okay, so the principal activity of Sedap Makan Sdn Bhd is the manufacturing of instant noodles. The company closed its first set of account to 31st December 2014. Okay, so you need to know when the financial year end or you need to know when the basis period because you wanted to determine when the company can claim for their initial allowance. Okay, so the company acquired office equipment comprises of the following. Okay, so this one is considered as office equipment, okay, whereby the company purchased telephone system as well as office safe. Okay, so the total is 100,000. So both are actually under office and equipment. Okay, so if you look at here, the rate for the office and equipment is 10% for the annual allowance. For the initial allowance, it is 20%. Okay, as we have discussed, for the asset, Annual allowance is the same for all types of asset, which is 20%. Okay, so you must look at the acquisition date here, okay, because it will determine when you can claim for the initial allowance, okay. So here, the company closed its account on 31st December, so it means that the accounting period is starting from 1st January 2000, this one 2014 lah, until 31st December 2014. Okay, so if they have the financial year end 1st January up to 31st December, that one is easier for you lah. Okay. So here, when the company acquired the asset on 1st April 2014, okay, and also 1st October 2014, it's basically within this period. Okay, so means that when the company acquired this asset, the company can claim the initial allowance in 2014. Okay, so that their first initial allowance. Okay, so in exam, you can use this format. Okay, so please use this format instead of the format like this one. Okay, so I prefer please use this format. Okay. Okay, so if you look at here, okay, so the company actually acquired the asset in 2014. Okay, it is basically within this period, okay, which is a basis period 1st January up to 31st December. So then this one is for YA 2014. Okay, so therefore, the company can claim for their first initial allowance in 2014. All right, so the total QPE is 100,000. Okay, so here QPE is 100,000 and then the rate is 20% for the initial allowance and annual allowance it is 10%. Okay, so for 2014, the company can claim for the initial allowance. So this one is 20% you multiply with the QPE which is 100,000. Okay, so then you will have 20,000. Okay, so that's for 2014, they can claim for the initial allowance. Okay, and then the company also can claim for the annual allowance, which is 10,000. Okay, so how we got this 10,000? The annual allowance rate, which is 10%, you multiply with the QPE, which is 100,000. Okay, so then you will have 10,000. For 2015, you can also claim annual allowance, which is 10%. So 10% multiply 100,000. So it is also 10,000. Okay, same goes until 2021. The company can only claim up to 2021. Okay, so why? Because remember, the company can only claim for the initial allowance and also the annual allowance up to the amount of QPE. Okay, so the total amount of QPE for this office equipment is 100,000. So therefore, if let's say the company still own the asset in 2022, the company cannot claim for the annual allowance anymore. Because if you total up this claim, which is the initial allowance and also the annual allowance here, it is basically 100,000 already. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so the total is already 100,000. So again, so that's why if the company still own the asset, the office equipment, in 2022, the company can no longer claim for the annual allowance for that office equipment. Okay, because the company already fully claimed the initial allowance and also annual allowance for that office equipment. Okay, so that's example 18.12. Any questions so far, class? Ada soalan tak? Hopefully you can follow. I believe that this one is quite easy lah because you need to know how much the QPE. You also need to know how much the rate. Okay, so initial allowance is the same for all the types of asset. Okay, so you only need to know what is the annual allowance for that types of asset. Okay, you also need to know when the company can claim for their initial allowance and also annual allowance. Okay. Okay, so this one is accelerated capital allowance. So this accelerated capital allowance where the company or where the government give the rate for the capital allowance is higher compared to the one that we have here. Okay, so here the rate for the initial allowance is 20% usually for most of the asset. Okay, and then here are actually the annual allowance. For the accelerated capital allowance is basically the incentive given by the government for the companies, whereby the company can actually make a claim for their capital allowance earlier than the normal one. Okay, for example, if you look at this one, recycling of waste. Okay, so expenditure incurred on the provision of plant or machinery for the manufacturing business of a company, which are used exclusively or otherwise for the recycling of waste or for the further processing of the waste into a finished product, will qualify as qualifying plant expenditure. Okay, so if you look at here, the initial allowance is 40%. It's not 20%. Okay, and then the initial allowance is 20%. So when the company have higher rate for the initial allowance here, means that the company can make full claim for that asset earlier than the normal rate. Okay, so that is basically accelerated capital allowance. Okay, so for this one, you can read on your own. Okay, so it's rarely being tested by the student, to the student, because it's basically focusing on the certain sector. Okay, so just like this one, agriculture. Okay, so this one is manufacturing. Okay, so reinvestment in qualifying projects. So this one you are going to learn in your text too. Okay, so you can read this one on your own. Okay, so this one as well. Okay, so ni baca sendiri. Okay, so 7.4. 7.4 is basically discuss about the small value assets. Okay, so this is where the company purchase the asset, and then the asset of the value for the asset is less than 2,000 ringgit, less or equal to 2,000 ringgit. Okay, so this one less or equal to 2,000 ringgit. Okay, so the asset is used in the business, so means that the company can claim for the capital allowance. Okay, so for this asset, if the company acquire the asset, okay, and then the value is less or equal to 2,000 ringgit, then the company can claim 100% capital allowance on that asset when the company acquire the asset. Okay, I give a simple example, like the company acquire a television. Okay, so let's say the value for the television is 1,700. Okay, so the value is less than 2,000. Okay, so therefore this TV is considered as small value asset. Okay, so when it is small value asset, let's say the company acquired this TV in 2021. Okay, so it means that in 2021, the company can claim capital allowance on this television 1,700, which is 100%. Okay, means that the company don't have to follow the rate given earlier. Okay, so which is 20% for the initial allowance. For the TV, it is maybe office equipment. So then 10% for the annual allowance. Means that we don't have to follow that. The company can claim 100% capital allowance for this TV for 2021. So it means that 1,700. Okay, so that's for the small value of asset. But we have limit here. Okay, so if you look at here, with effect from YA 2020, the value of each asset not exceeding 2,000 each is eligible for full deduction of capital allowance in the year of purchase, subject to an aggregate limit of 20,000 ringgit. Okay, so it means that the company can purchase the small value asset. Okay, and then the small value asset for each of the asset is less than 2,000 ringgit or equal to 2,000 ringgit. But if let's say the company purchased a lot of small value asset, okay, and if let's say it's more than, the total is more than 20,000 ringgit, therefore the additional from after that 20,000 is you must calculate according to initial allowance and also annual allowance given. Okay, so you cannot claim 100% for that small value asset if the total exceed 20,000 ringgit. Okay, maksudnya for the additional one, okay, let's say the company purchased the small value asset, now the total is 25,000 ringgit. Okay, for the first 20,000, the company can claim 100%. Okay, but the additional 5,000, the company must calculate initial allowance 20%. Okay, annual allowance depend on the types of asset. Okay, for example, it is office equipment, so means that the company need to calculate 10%. Okay, because the aggregate threshold is 20,000 ringgit. Okay, so that's for small value asset. Ada soalan tak kelas so far? Are you following the discussion? Class, are you there?
Yes, madam, no questions.
Okay, so next one. Okay, so the next one, 7.4.1. small medium enterprise. Okay, so this one is applies for the small medium enterprise only. Okay, so if let's say the small medium enterprise incur the expenses, I mean that they purchase the asset, small value of asset, then the value is exceed 20,000, still they can claim 100% for that small value of asset. Okay, it means that this aggregate threshold 20,000 ringgit does not apply to the SME. Okay, so 7.42, okay, so lifespan. Okay, small value assets eligible for full deduction of capital allowance refers to plant and machinery having a lifespan of more than 2 years. Okay, so it means that if the company acquires small value asset and then the small value asset, their lifespan is more than 2 years, means that the company can use that asset more than 2 years. Then the company can claim for the capital allowance. Okay, but if let's say the company cannot use that asset for more than 2 years, maksudnya the company need to replace that asset every 2 years or less than 2 years, then the company cannot claim for the capital allowance. Okay, but they can claim revenue expenditure. Okay, so means that the expenses incurred by the company is can be deducted as allowable expenses. Okay, means that if the company acquire the small value asset, then the lifespan is less than 2 years, the company cannot claim for the capital allowance for that asset, but the company can deduct that as allowable expenses. Okay, kalau deduct as allowable expenses means that if you start with the PBT, so that one is considered as allowable expenses lah. Okay, but if let's say the company acquire the small value asset, let's say they acquire TV, just like previous one, okay, the value is less than 2 years, okay, the company can use that TV for more than 2 years, then the company can claim for that capital allowance. Okay, but if let's say the company acquired something like, okay, so let's say the company run a business like resort. Okay, so the company provided fork and spoon to the customers. Okay, therefore in that case fork and spoon they need to replace every 2 years. That one is actually the asset for the company for their business. Okay, so replacement basis means that the company replace that fork and spoons every, not maybe less than 2 years. So in that case, expenses incurred to purchase the fork and spoon is deductible expenses. Okay, that one is allowable expenses. Okay, so 7.4.3 is what happened before this. Okay, so if this one is how you determine the value of asset, small value of asset. So you can read this one as your knowledge, okay, because if this one, this threshold, this value, okay, which is 2000 is starting from 2020 until 2021. Before this, the value for the small value asset is 1,300. Okay, so it means that if the company acquire the asset, the value is more than 1,300, is not considered as small value asset. Okay, but now it is increased to 2,000 ringgit. Okay, so this one is accelerated capital allowance on ICT equipment. Okay, so this one, if the company acquire ICT equipment, the initial allowance is 20%, annual allowance is 20%. Okay, so the examples are, okay, so you can read this one. Okay, so here are category of ICT equipment. So please take note that we also have printers, scanners, okay, software, system, storage, screens, and so on. So this one is related to computer lah. Okay, so because sometimes the student misunderstood that printers is under the category of office equipment. Kalau office equipment, the rate is 10%, but printers is actually under ICT equipment. So when it is under ICT equipment, the annual allowance is 20%. Okay, so please take note the details here. Okay. Okay, so companies currently claim. Okay, so this one, okay, tak apalah, you learn this one in your text too. Okay, tak apalah baca kat text tu. Alright, this one read on your own. Okay, so this one is the latest regulations. Okay, so machinery and equipment. Okay, so the Penjana incentive have provided accelerated capital allowance on machinery and equipment, ICT equipment in use in the business to be eligible for initial allowance 20%, annual allowance 40%. Okay, so here if you look at the rate that we have discussed earlier on for the machinery and also for the office equipment, the equipment, it is 10% and also 14% and also 20% for heavy machinery. Okay, so then for the asset that the company acquired during this period, which is 1st March 2020 until 31st December 2021, the government gave an incentive in their economic stimulus package whereby the company can claim initial allowance 20%. This one is still the same, but the annual allowance is 40%. Okay, so this one is include machinery and equipment as well as the ICT equipment. Okay, so you can also read the details. Okay, you can just search about this one in the internet, then you can find a lot regarding this one. Okay, for example, we have this one. So this one is provided by PwC. Okay, accelerated capital allowance for machinery and equipment, including ICT equipment. Okay, it's basically the same with the one that I have mentioned earlier. Okay, so the increased annual allowance rate of 40% will be extended to cover capital expenditure incurred until 31st December 2021. So it means that if the company acquired the asset during this period, which is 1st March 2020 until 31st December 2021, the company can claim the annual allowance 40% for that asset. Okay, provided the asset is basically under the category of machinery and equipment as well as the ICT equipment. Okay, so this is the latest one. Okay, so you can read this one on your own. Okay, so we actually have done discussing about the initial allowance and also annual allowance. Okay, so now we are going to move to residual expenditure. Okay, so residual expenditure at any date in relation to an asset is the total qualifying expenditure incurred by a person on the provision, construction or purchase of the asset before the date less, okay, any initial allowance made to that person in respect of the asset, any annual allowance made to that person in respect to the asset, and any annual allowance which could have been claimed if the asset had been used for the purpose of the business for OIA. Okay, so this one, residual expenditure, is basically QPE, which is qualifying plan expenditure, you minus initial allowance, you minus annual allowance that the company claimed. And then we also have notional allowance. So what is notional allowance? It is basically the allowance where the company own the asset, but the company do not use the asset during the year. Okay, that one is notional allowance. The company can still claim for that. The rate is similar to the annual allowance. Okay, so in order to get this residual expenditure, QPE, you minus initial allowance, you minus annual allowance, then you minus notional allowance if any. Okay, so residual expenditure is also known as tax written down value. Okay, so let's look at this example again. Example 18.12. Okay, for example, let's say you wanted to know how much the residual value for this asset as at December 31st, 2014. Okay, so you wanted to know the residual value for this asset. So it means that for 2014, the residual value is 100,000, then you minus 20,000, you minus 10,000. So then you will have the residual value for this asset on 2014, it is 70,000. Okay, and then if you wanted to know how much the residual value for 2015, it means that the qualifying expenditure, you minus the initial allowance for 2014 minus annual allowance for 2014, and then minus 10,000 for 2015. Okay, so then the residual expenditure for these office equipment in 2015 is actually 60,000. Okay, so then you can do the rest until the end. Okay, if you wanted to know the residual expenditure. Okay, so usually we calculate this residual expenditure when the company want to dispose their asset. Okay. Okay, so the next one. Okay, so that's regarding the residual expenditure. Okay, cost of dismantling and removing the asset. Okay, so with effect from YE 2009, cost of dismantling and removing plant and machinery and restoring the site on which the plant and machinery is located is to be included as part of residual expenditure in computing the balancing adjustment. Okay, so here if let's say the company acquire the machine, okay, then when the company dispose the machine, okay, means that they sold for that machine. Okay, the company incurred dismantling cost or cost to remove that machine. Okay, so the cost incurred by the company to remove that machine, you must add with the residual expenditure for that machine. Okay, so that is means by this one. Okay. To clarify this, the requirement to dismantle and restore the site must be pursuant to any written law or agreement. Okay, the asset which has been dismantled is not used for any business of the person or other person. Means that the asset is no longer being used in the business. Okay, so grant subsidy, you can read this one on your own. Okay, so next one. Okay, so what we have discussed so far is actually when the company acquire the asset by cash. Okay, so just like this office equipment, the QPE is 100,000 provided the company purchased by cash. The company paid 100,000 ringgit. Okay, so now we are going to discuss what happened if the company acquire the asset through hire purchase. Okay. A person incurs capital expenditure under a hire purchase agreement on the provision of plant and machinery for business purpose shall be deemed to be the owner of that machinery or plant. Okay, it means that if you acquire the asset through hire purchase, even though you don't make the full settlement for that asset yet, you are considered as the owner for that asset. Okay, as such, the capital allowance will be made available to him. So means that you can claim for the capital allowance. However, the initial and annual allowances would be computed by reference to the deposit paid and the capital portion of any installment paid in that basis period. Hire purchase interest is allowed as a revenue expense. Okay, so when you acquire the asset by hire purchase, okay, so you need to pay the principal amount and also the interest. Okay, so the one that you want to calculate for the capital, when you want to determine the qualifying plan expenditure for that asset, you must take out the interest. Okay, you cannot consider the interest as part of the QPE. Okay, you just need to take the principal amount. Principal amount is referring to the amount paid to the seller. Okay, based on the cost of the asset. Okay, and then for this hire purchase transaction, you need to calculate the QPE for that asset every year. Okay, because the QPE is determined based on how much you paid for that asset during the year. Therefore, the QPE for the asset is different from one year to another. Okay, for example, this year maybe your QPE is 50,000, next year is 20,000. Okay, it based on how much you paid for that asset during the year. Okay, the deposit and every new installment paid, capital portion, will be entitled to claim initial and annual allowance. Okay, in practice, it will be easier to compute initial allowance on new installment paid and to compute annual allowance on the accumulated. Okay, pelajari baca sendiri. Okay. So for this interest, when the company purchase for the asset under hire purchase, the interest that the company paid is considered as allowable expenses. Okay, so we have example here, example 18.17. Okay, so this one, Mabel Lee Berhad acquired a folding machine on hire purchase terms as follows. Okay, so this is the cost for the machine, 126,000. Okay, then the company paid deposit on 1st September 2020. The amount is 30,000. Hire purchase amount is 107,520. Hire purchase interest included in above is 11,520. Okay, so whereby this one is the installment payment by the company, which is inclusive of principal amount plus interest. Okay, so remember you must take out the interest portion. Okay, and then the term of repayment is 24 months. It means that the company need to pay for that machine for into 24 months. Okay, so the first installment of 4480 commenced on 1st September 2020. So this is the first installment. Okay, and then you must take note that this one really salah Okay, this one is interest portion from the for their so this one salah. So this one is the interest portion. Okay, interest portion for the hire purchase, for this hire purchase. Bukan dia punya installment. Their installment here is 4480. So this one is principal amount plus interest. Okay, so you must take out the interest portion. Okay, so kalau you tengok sini, Okay, so this is how the author for this textbook calculate for the capital portion of installment. Okay, so you need to know how much the amount paid per month by the company without the interest. Okay, so you need to calculate for this one first in order to know. All right. Okay, so to answer for this question, you can do like this one. Okay, instead of doing like this, macam susah sikit for me lah. Okay, I think this one is easier. Dia tak tunjuk lah pula. Okay, so let me do it for you. Okay, so this one, in this example, okay, so the cost of the machine is 126,000. Okay, and then this is the deposit paid by the company, which is 30,000. Okay, and then the term of repayment is 24 months. Okay, so you need to know how much the installment made by the company without the interest. Okay, so how you can calculate for that is 126,000, you minus the deposit paid, you divide by 24. Okay, so I think that one is easier compared to this one. Okay, kalau you calculate for, if you use that formula, calculator lah. So 126,000, which is the cost, you minus 30,000, then the amount is 96,000. Okay, so this is the installment that you need to make. Okay, because the cost is 126,000, you already paid for the deposit 30,000, then you need to pay another 60,000, which is the principal amount. Okay, so you need to focus on this because you must take out the interest. Okay, so you don't have to bother about the higher purchase amount. Okay, then you must divide by 24 months because the company need to pay in 24 months time. Okay, so that's when you have 4,000 ringgit. Okay, so this figure is without interest. Okay, so that one is a shortcut. Okay, so again, the cost you minus deposit, then you divide by number of months. Okay, number of installment. Okay, so then you will have the amount, which is the amount that the company need to pay during for the installment without the interest. Okay, so you need to know that, and then you also need to know when the company can claim their initial allowance and also annual allowance for that asset. Okay, when would be the first time the company can claim for the capital allowance for this asset? Okay, so if you look at this one, the company close its accounts to 30th June every year. Okay, so they close their account 30th June every year. Then they acquire this machine on 1st September 2020. Okay, so you need to know the basis period for this one. Kalau dia close its account on 30th June, so means that 1st July until 30th June. Okay, so they acquire in 1st September 2020. So therefore, this one should be 2020. This one should be 2021. Okay. So this one, when you look at 1st September 2020. So this one, the company acquired the asset in which YA class? This is the basis period, which is 1st July 2020 up to 30th June 2021. So this date under which YA?
21.
Yes, correct. It is 2021. So therefore, the company can claim for this asset their initial allowance and also annual allowance starting from YA 2021. Okay. So means that you start with 2021 lah. Okay. Copy je lah ya. Copy, paste. Okay, so 2021, you tak boleh take this figure, which is you need to calculate how much the amount that the company paid during this period. Okay, kalau you tengok how much deposit that the company paid is, berapa banyak dia bayar deposit kelas?
30,000.
30,000. So means now your aim is you need to calculate how much the company actually berapa yang dibayar for that YA 2021. Okay, so for 2021, the company made a monthly installment as we have discussed earlier. So this one, how you calculate is 126,000. You minus the deposit, which is 30,000. You divide by 24. Okay, so then supposedly you have 4,000 lah kat sini. 126,000 minus 30,000. Then you divide by 24. It is 24. Okay, so it is 4,000. Okay, so this one exclude interest. Okay, so the deposit here is 30,000. Now you wanted to know the QPE for 2021. Okay, so QPE for 2021 is based on how much you paid for that year. Okay, so for that year means that for this period lah, starting from 1st July 2020 until 30th June 2021, how much the company paid. Okay, so in this case, the company paid deposit 30,000 and then the company also made installment. Okay, so for this basis period or for this YE 2021, how many installment that the company already made? Berapa banyak dah dia buat installment?
10, dalam 21 ya?
Berapa installment dah the company buat untuk this YE 2021? Maksudnya during this period lah.
10.
10 macam ni kira.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes, correct. Okay, it is 10 months. Okay, because the company made first installment is on 1st September 2020. Maksudnya for YE 2021, the company closed its account on 30th June 2021. Okay, so the company made installment on September. So September, October, November, December, January until June is actually 10 months. Okay, so means that for 2021, the QPE is 10 months installment. So that's why here it should be you multiply by 10 lah. Okay, which is 4,000 you multiply 10. So then it is 70,000. The company already made installment for, the company paid for 2021, the amount is 70,000. So therefore the QPE is actually 70,000 lah. Okay, so the QPE for 2000, so this one is for 2021. Okay, so this one is QPE 2000 2021. Okay, the figure is 70,000. So means that for 2021, the company can claim for the initial allowance, which is 20%, you multiply with 70,000, it is 14,000. Okay, so this one is folding machine, it is 14%. Okay, then this one should be 14%, you multiply with 70,000. Okay, so then it is 9,800 for the annual allowance. Okay, and then if you want to calculate for 2022, okay, for 2022, QPE again is based on how much you paid for the year. Okay, so for 2022, the basis period start from 1st July 2021 until 30th June 2022. Okay, so the number of months, obviously 12 months. So means that in 2022, the company paid 4,000, you multiply by 12. Okay, so that will be the QPE for 2022. Okay, okay, so if you use this format, okay, this format landscape, you can claim for the initial allowance. Okay, so basically, the company can claim the initial allowance and also annual allowance for this year. Okay, why? Because the company still make a payment for this year. Okay, as long as the company still make the payment, the company can claim for the initial allowance for that asset. Okay, katakanlah you nak kira juga for 2022. Let's say the company own the assets for 2022. Okay, so I usually use this method on how to calculate. Okay, so for this one, the company can also claim for this annual allowance. So 70,000. Okay, multiply 70,000. So 2022 also they can claim for this 9,900. Okay, so when the company purchased paid the payment in 2022, the amount is 48,000. Why 48,000? Because the company made installment 4,000 per month. Then in the year 2022, we have 12 months. So means that you multiply 12. Okay, so then this is the rate, which is 20%, 14%. Okay, so then the company can claim initial allowance on this asset, which is 20% multiply 48. Okay, you multiply 48,000. Okay, so that is basically the initial allowance for 2022. Then the company also claim for 40%, you multiply 48,000. Okay, so that's for 2022. But the question don't ask you to calculate for 2022. Okay, so later when we do the tutorial, then you will discover this thing lah. Okay, how you calculate the details until the end. Okay, so you can read the example 18.18 on your own. Okay, so again, I would like to emphasize that for the hire purchase transaction, the QPE for each year is different. Okay, it is based on how much you actually paid for the asset during the year. Okay, and then you can still claim for the initial allowance for the year. Okay, until you make the full settlement for that asset. Itu je lah hire purchase. Okay, so now let's move to the next one. Ada soalan tak?
Sekejap, can claim initial allowance until settlement.
Yes, maksudnya kalau you still paid that asset.
24 months can claim.
Maksudnya betul lah boleh claim, tapi biasanya kita kira by year kan Nadila?
So 2 years lah kalau macam tu.
2 years lah.
1 year.
2 years lah kan, 24. Macam
48,
ini yes, 48. Maksudnya kalau 2023 dia boleh still lagi claim kan? Okay, so PPE for katakanlah we are discussing about this machine. Okay, so kalau kita tengok this machine 2023 dia up to berapa bulan lagi lah, sebab dia dah bayar berapa bulan. Kat sini dia bayar 10 bulan, kat sini dia bayar 12 bulan. So means that dia ada remaining how many months? 2 bulan je lah kan?
Yeah.
2 bulan je lah, maksudnya KPE for 2023 2 bulan which is 4,000, you multiply 2. Lepas tu pada tahun 2023, because the company still paid for the installment, means that they can still claim for the initial allowance for 2023.
Even though just 2 months.
Yes.
Alright.
Sebab nanti bila even though dia bayar 2 months, the KPE ni rendah lah, which is 4,000, you multiply 2 kan? So salah ni. Which is 4,000, you multiply 2. 8,000 je. Okay, so dia punya IA pun rendah jugalah. Okay. Okay, so that's for that one. Any more question? Sebab kita nak move to motor vehicle. Motor vehicle ni lagi complicated, dia ada restriction. Dia tak adalah complicated, you need to understand. Okay. Okay, kalau tak ada soalan, we move to this one. Okay, so qualifying expenditure for motor vehicles. Okay, so when you learn business expenses before, when we discuss about lease rental, motor vehicle has restriction. Okay, so for this capital allowance, there is also restriction for the motor vehicles. Okay, so whether you purchase the motor vehicle by cash or whether you purchase by hire purchase, there is restriction. Okay, so what are the restrictions? Let's look at this one. So this is the summary. Okay. Okay, so the restriction. Okay, so the amount of restriction is 50,000 or 100,000. Okay, it does not apply to the commercial vehicles such as taxi, bus, lorry or van. Okay, so just like when you learn about business expense lah. Okay, so if the company purchase for the commercial vehicle, there is no restriction for the amount that the company can get deduction for the installment made. Okay, so same goes to this one. For the asset that the company purchase for the commercial vehicle, if the value is more than 150,000, the company can claim the full amount as their QPE. Okay, so this restriction is basically when you want to determine the QPE for that motor vehicle. Okay, so that's why here restricted qualifying expenditure. Okay, so if you look at here, motor vehicle for the commercial vehicle, bus, lorry, taxi, van, no restriction on the amount of qualifying expenditure. For example, the company acquire a bus, let's say the value for the bus is 200,000, so means that the QPE for that bus is 200,000. There's no restriction. Okay, but for the new passenger vehicle, such as motor car for general manager, salesman, etc. Okay, so this one applies when the company use that asset in the business. Okay, because if you look at the criteria or the conditions to claim for the capital allowance, the company must use that in the business. Okay, so for the new passenger vehicle, such as motor car for general manager, salesman, etc., If the cost is less or equal to 150,000, the QPE is restricted to 100,000 ringgit. Okay, so it means that if let's say the company purchased the car worth 110,000, okay, so the value still less than 150,000, so the QPE for this car is 100,000. Okay, even though the company paid 110,000, the QPE is only 100,000. Okay, and another example, if let's say the company purchased the car, the value for the car is 80k, so the QPE for this car is 80,000. Bukan 100,000 because you must choose whichever lower lah. Okay. Then if the value of the car is more than 150,000, okay, then the restricted amount for the QPE is 50,000 ringgit. Okay, katalah the company purchased the car worth 180,000. So it is more than 150,000. Then the QPE for that car is only 50,000. Okay, so this QPE is for you to calculate the initial allowance and also annual allowance. So the lower the QPE, so the lower the initial allowance or annual allowance that the company can claim. So means that they cannot reduce much of their tax liability. Okay, so that's why usually the higher the QPE is, the better for the company because they can claim more capital allowance. Okay, so why the government provide these regulations is because the government want to encourage Malaysians people to purchase local car because the value for the local car is less than 150,000. Okay, so to encourage the people to purchase local car, so that's why the government provide this regulation. Okay, so that is one of the reason why. Okay. Okay, so for the second-hand passenger car, okay, so if let's say the company purchase not a new car, it is a second-hand car from third party, the restricted amount is 50,000. Okay, so if let's say the company purchase the value for the car is 100,000, okay, the restricted QPE is 50,000. Okay, so that's how you determine. All right. Okay, so we have the example for this one. Let's discuss another example lah. Sebab this example is not comprehensive. Okay. Madam takut tak sempat masa. Okay. So you can read this example on your own. Okay. Okay, so this one is the company cannot claim for the initial allowance and also annual allowance before the commencement of business. Okay, so the company can only claim initial allowance in the first YA in which the business commence. Okay, so after commencement of business, okay, so the company can claim for that. Okay, so change of basis period. Okay, so whenever there are changes in the basis period, you must follow that new basis period. Okay, so the basis period we have discussed in the previous class. Okay, so example ni tak payah. Okay, so you can read this example on your own. Okay, so temporary disuse. Okay, so during the YA of temporary disuse, the plant and machinery is deemed to be in use, even though it was not actually used, provided the plant and machinery was used for the purposes of business immediately before disuse. Okay, means that before the company do not use the asset, the company use it. Okay, if during a period of disuse, the plant and machinery is constantly maintained in readiness to be brought back into use. So it means that even though the company not use the asset, for example, the machine, okay, the company still incur maintenance costs to ensure that the machine is in a good condition. Okay, and then the period of disuse is temporary. Okay, means that the company not use the asset for temporary period only. Okay, therefore the company can still claim for the annual allowance. Okay, so this one is also considered as notional allowance. Okay, so let's move to the next one, balancing allowance or balancing charges. Okay, as we have discussed before this, balancing allowance is just like your loss on disposal. Charges, balancing charges is like the gain on the disposal. Okay, so for the balancing allowances, if the residual expenditure is more than the disposal value is referring to the amount that the company received when the company disposed the asset. So then this one is balancing allowance. Okay, But when the residual expenditure is less than the disposal value, means that the disposal value is higher than the residual expenditure, this one is considered as balancing charge. Okay, so for the balancing charge, the company need to add in their calculation when they want to calculate for the statutory income. Okay, so however, this balancing charge is restricted to the amount of the initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company already claimed. Okay, so later we are going to look at the example lah. Okay, so please read this one on your own. Okay, so meaning of disposal. Okay, what it means? Disposal, it means that the company sold, discarded or destroyed, or if it ceases to be used for the purposes of business. Okay. Okay, baca lah ni. Okay. Okay, so how you determine disposal value? So usually it's based on how much the company can sell the asset to the third party. Okay, so that will be the disposal value. Okay, if let's say the company dispose the asset by way of insurance compensation or recoveries, so then the insurance compensation is considered as disposal value. Okay, I give you a simple example. You have a car, then the car is basically you pay the insurance for that. Okay, then during the year your car is stolen, so you can claim for the insurance for that. Okay, because you pay insurance for your car, so when the car is stolen, then you can claim compensation for the insurance company. Okay, so in that case, the compensation money that you receive from the insurance company is considered as your disposal price. Okay, so even though you not actually sold the goods, sold the asset. Okay. Disposal of motor vehicles. Okay. In the case of a motor vehicle not for commercial purposes, there is a restriction of qualifying expenditure. Okay, so remember when we discussed about the motor vehicle, if the value is less than 150,000 or equal 150,000, then restriction is 100,000. Okay, and then if more than 150,000, it is 50,000. So that's for the passenger car new. Okay, for second hand, it is 50,000. Okay, so when there is a restriction for the motor vehicle for their QPE, so then the disposal value you need to calculate. There is a formula on how to calculate for that. You cannot simply take the figure. Okay, for example, let's say the value for your car is 110,000. You can claim up to 100,000 only because this is the restriction. Okay, so let's say the company want to dispose the asset. Okay, the company sold the asset to the third party. You receive, let's say, 70,000. Okay, so you cannot consider this as your disposal price. You need to use certain formula because we have restriction here. Okay, so what is the formula? The restriction amount, which is 100,000, you divide by the cost for that car, which is 110,000. Then you might multiply with the disposal price here. Okay, 70,000. So then the amount that you will have here is considered as the disposal value for that motor vehicle. Okay, so later we are going to look at the example. Okay, so let's look at this example. So this example is comprehensive. Example 18.24. Okay, so please look at this example. This example is actually discussed about the hire purchase, restriction, disposal value and so on lah. Okay, so that's why I would like to discuss about this one. Okay, so example 18.4, C. Sinan Berhad, which made up his accounts to 30th September annually, purchased a second-hand motor car under hire purchase for its business purposes in July 2017. Okay, so now they acquire on July 2017. So they made up this account on 30th September. So maksudnya their financial account should be 1st October until 30th June every year. 30th September every year. So now the company purchased this motor car, second-hand motor car in July 2017. Okay, so you need to look at when the company can actually claim for this capital allowance for this car. So when would be the first YA the company can claim for this car? Class, dia beli July 2017. Which YA dia boleh claim? First initial allowance and also annual allowance. Anyone? 2000? YA, which YA? Does it? 18. 17 kan? Betul tak 17?
Betul.
YA 2017. Okay, sebab apa? Sebab for this period is 1st October 2016 up to 30th September 2017. So the company acquired on Julai maksudnya bulan 7 lah. Bulan 7 2017. Okay, it's basically happen between this period. So then the company can claim for this asset starting from YA 2017. Okay. The cash price of the motor car was 52,000 ringgit. Is there any restriction for this car? Ada restriction tak for the QPE? Class?
50,000.
50,000. Yes, correct. It is 50,000 because this one is second-hand motor car. Okay. So the QPE is restricted to 50,000 ringgit. So you must be careful lah. Okay. The company traded in its old car for 22,000 and agreed to pay a monthly installment of 1,500 ringgit for 24 months commencing on 1st August 2017. The car was sold for 26,000 on April 2021. Okay, so when the company paid for this, when the company disposed this car in on April 2021, which YA this one, class? Which YA? April 2021. YA 2020 ke, YA 2021 ke, YA 2022? Maksudnya this one should be which YA? Class? 30 11 9. 2021 lah, okay. Kenapa 2021? Because the company actually disposed that asset in April 2021. Okay, so it means that is basically for YA 2021. So you need to know about this one because when the company disposed the asset, when the company disposed the asset during the year, the company cannot claim for the annual allowance. Initial allowance, kalau company incur cost, initial allowance, the company still can claim for the asset when the company sold the asset during the same year. But for the annual allowance, the company cannot claim annual allowance during the year the company disposed the asset. So that's why you need to know which YA the company actually disposed the asset. Okay, so it means that the company can only claim the asset up to 2020 only. Okay, so that's the things that you need to know. Okay, so calculate the capital allowance and balancing charges for the company for the relevant YAs up to YA 2021. Okay, so first one, what you need to know is that you need to calculate how much the installment payment without the interest. Okay, so how to do that is the cost for the car is, cash price is 52,000. Okay, then the company trade in the car. Okay, traded in its old car whereby the company received 22,000. Okay, so then the company paid for that lah. Okay, so this one is considered as deposit. So you minus 20k, then you divide by installment, number of installment payment. How many months, class? Berapa kali dia buat installment? 24 months. Okay, so you divide by 24. Okay, kalau you kira, insyaAllah you get this figure. Masih betul kok. 52,000, you minus 20,000, then you divide by 24. Salah. Okay. Oh, sekejap. 52 okay, mana salah. This one is 22,000, bukan 20,000 22,000, so that's why salah. Okay, so this one should be 52,000, you minus 22,000, then you divide by 24. So then you have 1250. Okay, sama je lah dengan ini. Okay, so this one dia macam for me is quite long lah how to find the installment without the interest. I think this one is easier lah, which is the cost price, which is the cash price minus the deposit, you divide by the number of installment. So then the company need to pay 1250 per month. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, so this example. Okay, so the company purchased the asset on July 2017. Okay, so you need to know the basis period. Okay, so for the basis period 1st October 2016 up to 30th September 2017, it is YA 2017. Okay, so then this one is 2018, 2019. Okay, and then this one is 2020, 2021. Okay, so you need to know the basis period because you wanted to know the initial allowance and also annual allowance when the company can claim. Okay, so for this one, because the company acquired in 2017 for YA 2017, therefore the company can claim their first installment, their first initial allowance in 2017. Okay, so then if you look at here, as we have discussed, how to calculate the monthly installment is the cash price, you minus the deposit. In this case, it's the trading in value for the old car. You divide by the number of installment, then you have 1250. Okay, so again, as we have discussed, you need to calculate the QPE for each year. Okay, so we have QPE for 2017. It is based on how much the company paid during the year. So in 2017, the company paid deposit 22,000 ringgit. Okay, so this method that I use is a little bit different from in the textbook. You can use this method. I think this one is easier. Okay. Deposit that the company paid for 2017 is 22,000 plus the installment payment made. Okay, if you look at the question, the company made installment starting from bila dia start bayar installment. Okay, this one. This is on August 2017. Okay, so for 2017, for YA 2017, how many installment payment that the company already made? Berapa bulan? Last. Anyone? How many months the company made installment for 2017? Tunjuklah, okay. Okay, so this one, the company paid the first installment on 1st August 2017. This is the basis period for 2017, which is 1st October 2016 up to 30th September 2017. So maksudnya the company made first installment on August, then they closed its account on 30th September. So means that for 2017, the company only made 2 installments. Okay, so then for 2017, the total QPE that the company made is 22,000. You plus 2 multiply the installment, which is 1250. Okay, because the installment is 1250. So QPE for 2017 is 24,500. Okay, and then the rate for the initial allowance is 20%. The rate for annual allowance is 20%. Okay, so for 2017, the company can claim 4,900 for the initial allowance, and also annual allowance is 4,900. Okay, so for this QPE, the company can also claim the annual allowance for 2018, 2019, and also 2020. There is no capital allowance for the 2021 because the company disposed the asset in 2021. So that's why you don't claim for the annual allowance for 2021. Okay, and then for 2018, you need to calculate for the QPE for that motor vehicle. Okay, so how much the figure is, because in 2018 we have 12 months. Okay, so it means that the company made installment for 12 months. So then this one is how you got this figure, the installment 1250. You multiply with 12 months, then you will have 15,000 that the company paid in 2018. So that's why it is the QPE for 2018 is 15,000. Okay, so for 2018, you can claim for the initial allowance, which is 3,000. How we got this 3,000? 20% multiply 15,000. Okay, and then annual allowance is 20% multiply 50,000. Okay, and then for 2019, we have 20% annual allowance. Same goes to 2020. Okay, so for 2019, the company actually made installment payment. How many months class for 2019? Berapa kali dia buat installment? 2019. Class, berapa kali buat installment?
8,
Huh?
8 and 9.
9 je ke? 24. Ya. Dia kat sini dia bayar 2 bulan. Kat sini dia bayar 12 bulan. Nanti dah berapa bulan dah? 11 tambah 2. 14 kan? 10 bulan lah kan?
Yes.
Kalau 10 bulan, then if you calculate 10, you multiply 1250, the installment, the amount is 12,500. So this is the amount that the company paid during the year, which is 10, you multiply the installment, which is 1250. So this is the amount that the company paid during the year, which is 12,500. Okay, but the company cannot take this figure as their QPE. Okay, why? Because remember the restriction is 50,000. Okay, restriction is 50,000. So the company already claimed 24,000 QPE for 2017, 15,000 in 2018. Okay, so then if you total up these two, which is 24,000 plus 15,000, the amount of KPE that the company claim is now already 39,500. Okay, so means that for 2019, the company can claim only 50,000. You minus the amount of KPE that company already claimed, which is 10,500. Okay, because there is restriction. So then for QPE 2019, even though the company paid 12,500, the company can only claim 10,500 because there is restriction for the QPE because it is a second-hand car. Okay, and that's why it is 50,000, even though the car is 52,000. So that's why here the KPE is 10,500, this figure. Okay, so for YA 2019, the initial allowance is 20% multiply 10,500. Then same goes to the annual allowance. Okay, so for YA 2020 also 2,100. Okay. Okay, so for QPE 2020, you don't have to calculate anymore because the company do not make any installment, no longer make installment in 2020. Okay. So now the company disposed the car. The disposal value is 26,000 ringgit. Okay. So the company disposed in 2021, which is YA 2021. So 2021, the company cannot claim for the annual allowance. Okay, so for this part, cannot claim. Same goes to this one. Okay, so you need to know how much the residual expenditure. Okay, so to know how much the residual expenditure is, qualifying plan expenditure, you minus the initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company already claimed. Okay, so in this case, the total QPE is 50,000 because that is basically the restriction. Okay, so that's why if you total up 34,500 plus 15,000 plus 10,500, it is 50,000. So that is the QPE. So you minus all of this. Okay, mesti tolak semua the initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company already claimed. Then you will have 7,200 for the residual expenditure. Okay. Okay, so now the company disposed the asset at the price of 26,000 ringgit. Okay, so even though the disposal price is 26,000 ringgit, the company cannot consider that as the disposal value. Okay, because there is a restriction on the motor vehicle. Okay, so the restriction is 50,000. So how you calculate for the disposal value is the restriction amount, which is 50,000, we divide by the cash price, which is 52,000. Then you must multiply with the disposal amount, which is 26,000. Okay, so using this formula, kalau you calculate, then you will have this figure. Okay, so this is the disposal value. Okay, so in this case, disposal value is more than the residual expenditure. So then the difference is balancing charge. Okay, so balancing charge is 17,800. Okay, so for this balancing charge, you must calculate the total of this initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company already claimed. Kalau kita kira some this one until this one is actually sampai sini kan, if you total up this is basically 42,800. Okay, so the balancing charge is still less than this figure, so then the company can consider this as their balancing charge. But if let's say katakanlah the balancing charge here is 50,000. Okay, katakanlah for example this one, the balancing charge after you calculate it is 50,000, but the company only claim the initial allowance and also capital allowance 42,800 only. So in that case, the balancing charge is not 50,000, it is 42,800. Okay, so that's why you have restricted here. But this one, in this case, it is not applicable because the amount of the initial allowance and annual allowance that the company claim is only 42,800. Okay, so that's for 18.24. Okay, so this one, disposal with other asset. You can read this one on your own. Okay, so asset owned for less than 2 years. Okay, so this one, katakanlah the company own the asset, but the company dispose the asset within 2 years. In that case, all the initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company claim is considered as their balancing charge during the year the company dispose the asset. Okay, so this one, dia punya term is clawback. Okay, kalau kita tengok this example, Y Sun Manufacturing Berhad commenced business on 14 February 2021 and closed its account to 31st December 2021. It incurred expenditure on computer with printer on 1st April 2021 for 6,000 ringgit. Okay. They acquired on 1st April. Okay, so the computer was found to be faulty after 6 months usage. It was disposed of at 4,000 ringgit on 1st October 2021. Okay, so compute the relevant allowance available. Okay, so here the company acquired 1st April 2021. The company also disposed during the same year. Okay, so it means that it's still less than 2 years. Okay, so now the company can claim the initial allowance, which is 1,200. Okay, then you calculate for the residual expenditure when the company want to dispose the asset, which is 6,000 minus 1,200, it is 4,800. Okay, and then the company dispose at the price of 4,000 ringgit. Okay, so here if you calculate, the company actually have balancing allowance 800. Okay, so now because this one is the normal way how we calculate for the capital allowance and also disposal and so on. Okay, now because the company own the asset for less than 2 years, then in this case, when the company dispose the asset, the company has balancing charge 1,200. It's not this figure. Okay, why? Because the company disposed the asset less than 2 years. So whatever initial allowance and also annual allowance that the company claimed before the disposal is considered as balancing charge. Okay, so in this case, the company already claimed initial allowance 1,200. So therefore, this is considered as balancing charge. Okay. But in the case where the company dispose the asset, but the company has a good reason why they dispose the asset for less than 2 years, and then the IRB accept that reason, so then you can calculate as normal lah, means that clawback does not apply. Okay, so bacalah, alright. Okay, so this one, use plant and machinery. Okay, so katakanlah this one, if let's say the company acquire the asset and then the owner, let's say the company use that for personal use first, alright, and then later the company bring it to business, the company use that for the business. So in that case, when the company bring that asset to the business, the company cannot claim for the initial allowance, but the company can only claim for the annual allowance. Okay, same goes when the company has a subsidiary overseas. The subsidiary in overseas, for example, use the asset, okay, and then now the asset was brought to Malaysia and being used by the company in Malaysia. So for the company in Malaysia, when they want to calculate for the annual allowance, they can claim for the capital allowance for the asset, provided they use in their business, but they can only claim annual allowance. There is no initial allowance. Okay, and then for this one, you can look at how you determine the QPE. Okay, so for the plant or machinery which was in use for a non-business purpose prior to being used for the purposes of business, okay, so you must take the market value for their qualifying plant expenditure when the company used that for the business. Okay, and then for the machinery or plant which was used for a business outside Malaysia and is brought into use for the purposes of a business in Malaysia, how you determine the QPE is you take whichever lower between the market value or net book value on the day it is brought into use in Malaysia. Katakanlah the market value is 100,000, net book value is 90,000. So it means that you must took 90,000. Okay, so no initial allowance is available in all the situations is described above. Okay, so again, if the asset is under these two situations, the company cannot claim for initial allowance. The company can only claim for the annual allowance. Okay, I think we have discussed about this one, unutilized capital allowance, okay, whereby the company can carry it forward for the next year. Okay, I think we have discussed everything already. So the rest you can read on your own. Okay, so here are the details about the rate. Okay, so you can focus on this one because we are focused for this one only. Okay, so that's all for this topic. So please do the tutorial. I will give you tutorial afterwards. Any question before we end the session? Salam tak? Class?
As for now, no questions.
Okay, thank you, Lubna.